many people in this room already know the Fatiha. So what you can see in how we've translated it, this is actually a very good way of showing our kind of translation principles, which is to be as unobtrusive as possible and to preserve word order as much as possible. One thing a lot of people don't know is in Arabic, Arabic is very much about word order. The way that you have the grammatical markings in word order, the thing that the speaker thinks you most need to know is the word that comes first. So in Arabic, the direct object can come at the beginning of the sentence, and you just know that by the way in which you inflect it at the end. So in other words, you can't mimic word order all the time in how you translate it. Otherwise, you'd end up with Yoda speak or something even more garbled than that. So here we have, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds, the compassionate, the merciful. Master of the day of judgment, thee we worship, and from thee we seek help. So here you see in verse 5, this is one of the things. You see a lot of translators will have you alone or thee alone we worship, or they'll have we worship you alone, things like this, or you'll have the ones where we worship and praise and seek beneficence from you alone, and we do this from you alone. So we're trying to both preserve the word order and keep it really as simple as possible, have no interpretation in the translation itself. There's places where you can't avoid that, but we try to avoid it as much as possible. And then, of course, you've got the issue, somebody's going to say, well, why are you using thee? All right. Well, there are a few reasons. One is the problem that you have whenever you read the Quran, almost any translation that's into modern English, is the distinction between the second person singular and the second person plural. In Arabic, and particularly in the Quran, this is of the utmost importance. Sometimes some of the most, you might say, intricate secrets of how the Quran works are found in what's called iltifat. That is a quick switch from who is being addressed or who is the speaker. And so sometimes you'll find something, especially in the Quran, where it's addressing the Prophet himself, as the commentary tradition would maintain, and then all of a sudden it changes to addressing the Muslim community. So if you're using you for both of those, completely lost in translation. And you'll see in almost every translation where this is done in modern English, this is completely lost. And so we use this for that reason. Also, because the most widely read translation of the Bible today, anybody know what it is?
James.
It's still the King James. It's still, I mean, there's something about that register. We don't have complete King James English. Like, we're not using the third person verbal forms and things along these lines. But there's something about that tone that for many English speakers says Scripture. And so we wanted to preserve something of that tone. If there's any Bible translation to which this is closest, it's probably the Revised Standard Version, not the New Revised Standard, because the Revised Standard tried to maintain some of that aspect of the eloquence of the King James as well. And then to go on, it says, guide us upon the straight path, the path of those whom thou hast blessed, not of those who incur wrath, nor of those who are astray. Now this, not of those who incur wrath. This, I think, is one of the situations where the manner in which you represent the Quran is of fundamental importance. Because usually, you're going to have this translated as not those with whom you are angry, or not those who suffer the wrath of God, or something like that. There's almost always going to be the implication that it is God's wrath of some kind. Well, the very interesting thing, for those of you who know the Quran well, where does human punishment arise from?
From your own deeds.
From your own deeds, right? And so on the one hand, it's the wrath is something that one incurs from what one does oneself. It is people who bring it upon themselves. And then the other aspect of it is that there's less permanence to it. The whole idea that God is the merciful, the compassionate, so there's less permanence to the notion of that wrath coming upon people if it's just that they incur it rather than that it's God's wrath. And so this is one of the subtle things where I think that paying very close attention to the nature of Quranic Arabic is important, and I think that there are a lot of translations that haven't fully done so. Another thing that you can't really get from this, and it would take me a long time to illustrate it, is, and this is where somebody like Ryan came in, is that we tried to be as consistent as we could throughout the translation. We developed an Excel word chart that had every word of the Quran in it. Every word that is there, and then every verse where it occurs. And so that we could make sure that we were being consistent with the words, or that if they weren't the same, that we knew why we were translating a particular word differently in a particular place. If you go through a lot of Quran translations, look at Arbery, Pickthall, the Muhammad Abdul Halim, that is the most widely spread today, you will find wild inconsistencies in how many words are translated, but especially, and this is where it gets confusing, in how some recurring phrases are translated. So we tried to avoid that as much as we could.